Right guys, welcome back to the channel, and today I'm going to show you how to paint Kurnoth hunters like Lucy's Sylvaneth that you've seen on the channel so far. Now the model that you see here is a little bit further forward than where I would want to show you the tutorial. Basically he's already been primed black, and then he's had a side and top down spray with the airbrush with Dryad bark. Now it is quite a dark colour, and you know, it's a perfect base for the Sylvaneth. I'm going to take you through the steps and obviously show you how to build up the layers and get the nice purple glows and pinks, and basically what I do to get it looking ready. So as you can see here, I'm not actually airbrushing. I was just trying to demonstrate that I basically hit the side and the top with the Dryad bark, so that it's still very dark, and obviously the undertones are still there from the black spray. But next up we use Beastie Brown by Vallejo Game Air, and this is to do a kind of top down coat, just so that the bits that are more susceptible to be hit by the light are a bit brighter. So I'm just coming in here, hitting the chest plate and obviously the tops of the arms and the head, and you can see it there starting to brighten up across the top. Spin him round and of course hit the tops of the thighs and the top of his butt crack, and it just starts to brighten it up quite a bit. Now it does look very warm here, but that's because of how wet the paint is. It does dry a little bit more toned down. You can see here I'm going across the top, making sure I'm getting his head, and of course the tops of his thighs and his arms as well. So you don't need too much of this, but you can see there it is painted up, and there you go. Once it's dry, you can see it is toned down. It's a lot richer but not quite as bright. Just to tone it down and of course fill in all the cracks, I'm going to give him a wash with Agrax Earthshade, so it really fills in all the gaps, and just adds that little layer of shade to the lighter brown that we've got. Please excuse me ginormous hands. I'm not used to filming tutorials, but I hope you do like this. And I am getting more used to me setup with the lights, so future tutorials should look a little bit better hopefully, and not cast that shadow that you see there. But yeah, give the whole miniature a wash with Agrax Earthshade, right over all the crevices, right into all the cracks. And of course the Kurnoth hunters and the Sylvaneth do have a lot of swirls and everything on there, and a lot of grooves in the bark as well. Now of course once you've washed them, you are going to need to let them dry totally. About 20-30 minutes should be good. But if you're batch painting, I did 60 dryads in one go, and by the time I got back around to the first, obviously it was dry. Okay, so there we go, he's totally dry. And next we're going to dry brush with Sylvaneth bark. And I use a nice thick brush here, and just very lightly brush it over the raised areas. You can see there in particular the face and the edges of the chest plate and the fingers. Very lightly just dry brush it over all of the raised areas, the thighs. And this colour, it's very rich and bony looking, but it sits really well on top of the Dryad bark, and really makes the edges pop without it being too stark of a contrast. And just make sure of course you get most of the model done. I'm just reapplying the paint here. Make sure you get most of the model done all the way around the sides and everything, and it just helps accent all of the edges. I should turn them back around in a second. There we go, you can see I'm going right on the thighs. Especially on the chest plate there and the face, you can really see it starting to pop on his eyebrow. And there we go, that's totally dry. So again, as the paint's dry, they look totally different. What I'm doing here is I'm starting to apply the first pink. This is Vallejo Air Warlord Purple. Now, yes, it is purple. And what I'm doing is I'm just spraying all the leaves and just blending it in to the bark itself. So obviously all the leaves coming out of the back, I'm spraying all of those up there, and just blend it down just till it meets the bulk of his body. And of course he's got some little plates on his arm, little leaves and branches on his arms there. And be very careful with the airbrush, you don't want to overspray onto other parts of the model. Always try and have the area behind where you're spraying clear of the rest of the model, so you don't overspray onto the rest of the legs and parts like that. You can see there I'm just getting the ones on the arms and the ones on the backs of his legs there as well. You can see that I've turned it so that I'm not spraying into the model essentially. I'm just doing under the back of his head there. And you want 2 or 3 thin coats, especially towards the higher edges of the leaves, and just, you know, 1 coat as it starts to blend into the brown, and just so it's a little bit brighter at the top. And next up we're going to be applying, now I'm showing you the Warlord Purple there because I forgot to show you it. Next up we're going to be applying Squid Pink by Vallejo Game Air. And basically we're going to be applying it to the same areas here, but we're going to go on just the top of the pinks that we've already done. And like I said, because you've done that extra layer or 2 towards the back of it, it then covers with the squid pink quite a bit easier. But here we go, we're just going to go for the top bits of the branches, very lightly applying it so that the blend just goes nice and steady. And of course you want it a little bit heavier towards the top of the branches so that the squid pink really stands out and pops more at the top. You can see there I'm just getting the edges of the ones on his arms and the backs of his legs. Of course, don't forget to spin the model over and get the back as well of the leaves at the top. You can see once again just making sure I get both sides of the leaves on the ones on his legs. And just reapplying another thin layer across the tops. Like I said, with it being quite light pigment, you do need 2 or 3 coats of this. Not so much where it blends into the Warlord Purple, but especially at the top there, you can see me reapplying a second coat just to the top of all the branches on his head. And that's almost it for the pink. Okay, so next up, I believe we're going to be applying some hexed lichen, this is, and we're going for the really deep parts of the root. On the Kurnoth Hunter itself, I'm spraying this piece straight into his chest where his heartwood is. Really want to make that bit dark, and by dark I mean totally covered in shadows so you can't even see because I'm blocking my own light. And then what I'm doing here is actually just applying it to the top of his head in the swirls, and then of course in each of the sort of the upper pieces of the arms. It looks very fleshy, and the bark looks as though it's almost like armor plates. Just going in between and trying to get all the fleshy bits, in particular around his waist, his upper arms, parts of his thighs and hips there as well. I'm just making sure that I'm getting those few pieces covered, ready to highlight again in a few moments with a lighter purple. Okay, so next up we're going to be applying, I'm not sure what colour this is, it's basically an amethyst purple. Lucy picked this up at a hobby store and she absolutely loved it, and it's basically a deep, rich, metallic purple. Old Games Workshop colours would be amethyst purple. I know they used to do it back in 2nd and 3rd edition. So what I'm doing with this is I'm applying this to the scythe, covering the entire blade. I also did this with the swords and the bows as well, because I did magnetize these Kurnoth hunters that I'm actually painting up right now. And the pigment in this paint is actually quite strong, so I think it actually only needed the one coat. But yeah, just make sure that you get in between all the gaps, especially the weaving in the middle of the scythe there. And again, I'm also spraying just the bottom of the scythe. With the sword, I obviously went all the way down the blade on both sides as well. And I love this colour, it's really, really bright and shiny at the same time. And I actually did Alariel's beetle with this as well. So what I'm doing now is I'm using Alien Purple, again by Vallejo Gamer. And with this, I'm just applying the highlights to the bark. You can see on the wrist in particular there, on the forearm plate, there's a couple of swirls. There's a swirl in the head, and of course the fleshy bits that we did with Hex Lichen. I'm also going to apply some to the fleshy bits on the legs, as well as the heartwood in the middle of the chest as well. And what I do with that is to represent like a glow. I just clip the edge of the breastplate, as you can see there, just to make sure that, well, I say just to make sure, just to emphasize the kind of glow and the importance of the heartwood. And just over the crevices there where I've done the Hex Lichen, just a tiny, tiny pop of the purple is all you need just to make a highlight. See here, I'm going for the fleshy bit on the back as well. Literally, it just needs a tiny, tiny pop just to make it a little bit bright. It looks very bright and intense here on the camera, but it is actually a little bit toned down, and it tones down a little bit more when it dries, as well as with the other colours. Next up though, I've still got the purple in my paint pot in the airbrush, and I've actually just added the silver to it, so that it's a very metallic, lighter purple. And what I'm going to do with this is I'm actually going to lighten the scythe by spraying only the top half of the scythe with this. I'm giving it a good bit of backflow here and giving it a really, really good mix up. Obviously the metallic paint, it's a little bit stronger pigment. You really need to make sure that you get mixed in together. I don't know why I thought of doing this, but I tried it when I painted Alariel, and it actually turned out really, really well for highlighting that metallic purple. So here we go. This might be a little bit more difficult to see on camera, but yeah, you can just about see it there. It doesn't look too metallic there, but it does when it dries. As with most of the colours, they look totally different with an airbrush once they've dried compared to how they are when they go on. And of course I'm just touching up the very bottom of that there. And what we do moving forward is I actually pour most of this out of my airbrush and use mostly silver. You can see that I've actually poured it out, and there's only the remnants of the purple, and this is nearly all silver now, with just that slight tinge of the purple that's left over. And I'm just going to do even less of the scythe, literally just the tip. You can see there, literally just the very tip of it, and that helps blend it in and really, really gives it that glowing effect. And I've done that on both the top and the bottom of the scythe, and as well as the stand on the bottom there as well. And there you go, really stands out. Okay, so next up I've applied just a tiny bit of Changeling Pink to dry brush along the squid pink at the back. You'll notice as well when I lifted it up there, the chest piece, it's not as bright, as intense as what it looked when I first did the paint. But yeah, much like we applied the Sylvaneth bark, we're now going to apply Changeling Pink. Changeling Pink is a dry paint, so it's very, very easy to use for dry brushing. Wipe most of it off, and then you just literally want to drag it ever so slightly over the leaves and it just picks up the edge of the leaves, and of course the top of the longer branches there. And there you go, just on the leaves, just really accentuates them, even lighter than what the squid pink does, but really makes them stand out. And this is almost how quick and easy it is to paint the Sylvaneth in the colours that you've seen on the channel. And there you go, you can see here, it's not far off being done now at all. Not far at all. So I'm using Retributor armour here, and all I'm doing is I'm going to be painting two small pieces. I'm going to paint the symbol just under the scythe itself, and there's also a small little hilt kind of at the bottom. And the gold just really makes the metallic purple pop, and adds a little bit of brightness and warmth to the scythe as well. Retributor armour is a fantastic colour. It's very bright and intense. I absolutely love it. And it's very easy to wash and highlight as well. As you can see, I'm just painting the whole symbol right down to the hilt. But make sure you get both the front and back, and of course in all the little gaps in there as well. But yeah, with the swords has very similar iconography on. I also did the same with the sword handles, and the bows themselves have got like almost little guards on them where the hunter actually holds it in his hand. So I also did the same method with those weapons as well, and it just means that they all tie in together and look pretty much the same no matter which weapons they are using. The colours of course fit in with the rest of the army. So you can see there I've done the top iconography, and there's a very small piece just at the bottom there. Again, making sure that I get both sides. But yeah, this is probably the most detailed that you're going to be painting by using this method. As you can see, it hasn't took me very long at all. And you know, I actually did all 3 hunters and Drycha whilst essentially filming this tutorial. Next up we're using Lead Belcher. It is quite a dark silver. It's a really nice base colour, and it's very easy to wash and of course highlight up as well. So I am painting the whole handle here. Of course making sure that you get both sides of the hilt that are above and below the hunter's hand as well. Now one thing I think I did forget to film is I actually used Genestealer Purple just to paint the 2 eyes on the hunter, and I used that with a small airbrush just to get that in there as well. But yeah, there's the middle bit done, and you can see there I'm just doing the top bit up to the hilt, up to the symbol there, making sure that you get the top and the bottom. Now after this we are going to apply some washes, so you do need to wait just a little bit for this to dry. But you know, if you're doing 3 of these hunters, by the time you've done the 3rd one, the first one is probably dry at this point as well. And there we go, and that just really sets it off and makes it pop with that gold. You can see there, it's very bright. Now what we're going to do is we're going to wash the gold with Seraphim Sepia, and what it does is it does tone it down just that little bit, but the way the sepia works on the gold, I can't really describe it, but it kind of keeps it shine, but really shades it down at the same time, and really emphasises the cracks and crevices. And the same with the bottom of the hilt as well. And there you go. So obviously we're going to let that dry a little bit, but next up I'm using Caraborg Crimson, or you can use Druchii Violet, just to wash the silver. And you just want a very, very thin layer because there's not too much detail on here, just a couple of the little grooves, and it just gives that little bit of a tint to the silver as well. And the Caraborg Crimson makes it look quite pink. And the last step, hurrah, is Necron Compound with a dry brush. Necron Compound is another dry paint, and we're actually going to dry brush just a little bit of the metallic purple, the gold, and the silver as well. And it just takes the very, very stark shade off, but it also really, really brightens up the edges of the gold in particular. You can see there that the circular shape of the symbol really, really pops. And obviously I have let the washes dry before doing this, and just given the scythe there a little tiny bit of a dry brush as well, and at the bottom. But again, I did this with the swords and the Kurnoth bows as well. And there you go. That is how you paint a Kurnoth hunter, and I've done that guy in about 20 minutes. It probably took me about an hour to do all three and Drycha. But yeah, there you go. I hope you've enjoyed this, guys. Thank you very much for watching. Let me know what you think, and we'll hopefully see you in another tutorial soon.